you're a father and you have children, and you've talked to a lot of people that are forward thinkers, brilliant in the way that they think about the different things that are going on in the world. I'm curious, after having this channel, your channel, and talking with all those people, are you generally optimistic or pessimistic about what's coming down the pike as a father? Like, do you think we're heading somewhere good, or do you think we're heading somewhere else? Yeah.
Wow, that's actually interesting. I mean, that's a fascinating question. Sure. Like, I'm torn, actually, to be honest, because like, I'm optimistic about the future, generally speaking, sure. And I see the potential for the future to be very good. Mm-hmm. But on the flip side, I'm also a realist, and I'm very connected to the state of the human kind of condition. Mm-hmm. And when I look at history, thousands and thousands of years, all civilizations, all countries, all peoples, there's so much strife and so much death and war and violence. And the roots of what's causing that, I'm not seeing that change much in today's society. Like, we think like, oh my gosh, we haven't had, a big war in like 70 years or at least a world war. We're over that. But the reality is, have humans really changed much? In 70 years, like in the scope of like thousands and thousands of years, right? Sure, we've had a brief sliver of peace in terms of global war. But to me, there's a decent chance that that's actually just a sliver, and the future reverts back to, the mean of what's gone on throughout history. And if that happens, like, yeah, things get messy. And with more technology, with more power, with nuclear weapons, with military might and drones and everything, like, we're talking about, the world could get really messy very fast. And so on the flip side, though, you have a lot of things that are positive. The world is more global, more connected. We're making inroads into poverty. Technology is giving people access to education and opportunity like never before. Mm-hmm. And there's a sense of a global identity and a global culture that's arising in some ways, that's bringing together humankind, which could lead to a paradigm shift where actually peace is more of a mean than war. So this is like, we're in a deep struggle right now. I don't think it's decided yet, actually. I think actually we are in the middle of this birth pain of what the future is going to look like. And I don't think people are talking about this enough, the deeper issues at hand. But yeah, hope that kind of gives you some sense of how I'm viewing things.
No, that's great. And it sounds like it, I mean, do you spend a lot of time thinking about this? Like, are you constantly like pondering where we're going to go? Or is it just something like, is it one of those things that life sort of takes over and then you're like, okay, what's going to happen to the future? I'm just curious how much of your mental power gets consumed by this sort of existential sort of threat that we might have,
Yeah. So it goes way back, and I've spent decades on this. Like, for example, in college, right now I'm 48. I think.
I'm surprised to hear that, dude.
Yeah.
You look younger than I do. I'm 34.
No, but back in college, I studied this thing. This major is political economy. It was basically poli-sci and economics, but it was also I was able to focus on Asia as well and economic development. And it was a mashup of history, economics, poli-sci, international relations, everything. Mm-hmm. And it was quite fascinating because I was able to kind of see how countries developed and what the role of government and economy and compared to different forms of, approaches. And I was able to really get a grasp of, history as well in the past few hundred years, thousands of years. And ever since then, I've been fascinated by the bigger questions of where are things headed, because I think ultimately, for example, we look at Tesla stock, this week, it's down and Elon's selling, and you might be like, oh my gosh, what's going on? But if you zoom out a little bit, does it really matter this week in the scope of even in 1 year? 1 year ago, like Tesla stock was much lower than it is now. It's like, why are we freaking out about today or this week? But if you zoom out 10 years or even 100 years, even longer, then things change. And so, ultimately, like for example, with World War II or so, or different things, different big wars, it's like people didn't expect those things to happen. But yet they ripped society apart in so many ways. Millions of people died. Like families just got, crushed in different ways. But that's something that were the people in control of that. Did they understand what was going on? No, it was largely handled by big foreign powers and people in government making those decisions on behalf of the lives of millions and millions of people around the world. And I'm afraid that dynamic hasn't changed. People think that they're in control. They think that their future is guaranteed. They know, what's going to happen 10 years, 30, 20 years down the road. My retirement is mine, everything. But it could flip like a switch, when things go awry. But yeah, that's why it's so fascinating to me, because the implications, the impact are so profound, in size and scope.
I agree. Do you think that sort of ability to zoom out and see the world on a larger time scale, do you think that's something that can be learned, or do you think that's just a natural ability that people have?
Yeah, I'm not sure. All I know is the past several years, I used to think that my thinking or my approach of looking at things from different angles and different time frames, and I thought that was just everyone did that. I thought that was just common. And back when I first was writing in Tesla's Motors Club back in 2012, 13, I thought everyone with their investments thought deeply and had big theses and spent a lot of time thinking about it. It was shocking when I was I learned wait a minute, most people don't have that. I'm wow. But yeah, I think one of the things that I don't know how or what's happened to allow that, but I kind of naturally look at many, many different angles. So I look at something, I'll look at lots of different angles, and then I'll look at lots of different time frames. And it all is kind of one thing to me. And then I'm okay sitting with it for a long time and just meditating and thinking about it. And so in a lot of ways, I'm not very reactionary, where if one thing happens, I'm not overly emotional. And, I'm kind of it's just one thing of the many angles. And I take a step back, and I could play around, a little bit with what's happening emotionally, reactionary a bit. But ultimately, I feel the most comfortable sitting back and seeing hundreds of things happening all at once and thinking about it in a deep manner. So even this week, for example, lots of stuff happened with the Fed, with stocks and all this stuff. And, I'm tempted to chime in on all this stuff, but my natural kind of sweet spot is I'll take it all in and I'll sit back and think more on a little bit a semi-philosophical angle.
Sure.
What is the meaning of all this? And then I can work backwards and try to figure out, how to respond on the day to day. But yeah, I'm not sure. I don't know, if how it's learned. But maybe one thing though is I think it's growing up, I hated reading. It was just I just never read, and even throughout high school, it was just a chore to read. And then in college, I learned how to read. I had a history professor who said, professors, we give you reading assignments not for you to finish them all, slowly, but for you to basically speed read them and get the core of it. And so it transformed my way of understanding what reading is, where I started to read fast and just get the core arguments. And then later on, I started to post-college read a lot of books on lots of different topics. I would go to this library that was close, and I would actually just pick out just like stacks of 10, 15 books, and I would read them in one afternoon, like really fast.
Wow.
And they would be on different topics like sociology or art or music, history, just like different stuff that I was like, I'd look at different interesting book titles and just spend a day or, doing that. And after doing that for several years, it just like, I hit a point where I'm like, oh my gosh, I understand these areas really, like not in a sense that I could give like, a detailed like college lecture on the minute things, more on the sense of, oh my gosh, I get the essence of like the stuff. I get the essence of sociology, of history, of this and this. Like I understand it, like the door opened, it just clicked. And from there, that's when I, it just, my way of thinking just opened up immensely. And then with business and investing, I did the same thing. I read thousands of books and very, very fast. And there was a certain point where I'm like, oh, this is what it's about. This is what business and investing is about. I get it. I understand it. Not from kind of a shallow view, but more from this, like you get it from inside out, not from like outside in. It's a weird thing. It's like one example is like, if you're really good at a sport, it's like you know it from the inside out. It's just like, it's just there.
Second nature, right? It just happens.
You don't have to play for 10 years and you just play a couple times and you get it all back. It's just all there. And that's kind of a similar analogy, with business investing or other stuff. It's, you learn it so well that it just it becomes part of you. And I think that's part of the background of, why I kind of look at things from different angles and, different time frames and try to go deep and then think and meditate on stuff. Yeah.
That's fascinating. And I think that's what gives it such a unique, you just described it. I think that's the unique voice behind your channel, is the fact that you have such a wide world view